Today, we're firing up the time machine and setting the dial to the year 2026. A new report just dropped that paints a wild picture of what a second Trump term could look like, and let's just say, it's a lot. So you're going to want to buckle up, because things are about to get really, really interesting.
Yeah, different is one way to put it. You're probably asking, how different? Well, let's kick things off with a brand new foreign policy doctrine that sounds like it was invented during a 3-day energy drink bender.
Get a load of this. The Don-roe Doctrine. You can think of it as the old-school Monroe Doctrine, but with a reality TV twist. The idea is, basically, if the U.S. government feels like a neighboring country owes it something, for whatever reason, it now claims the right to just pop over, militarily, and take their stuff, as compensation. Totally normal.
So what's fueling this brave new world? Well, it's an economic plan with the incredibly subtle title of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And this one piece of legislation is really the engine driving this entire agenda. And the result of that bill is, well, it's a real tale of two cities. Or two streets, I guess. Over on Wall Street, they are having the time of their lives. The S&P 500 is up a whopping 40%. But then you look over at Main Street, and job growth has completely flatlined, while about 10 million people are on track to lose their health insurance. It really is the best of times and, well, the worst of times, happening all at once.
So, you might be wondering, how did they pay for those permanent tax cuts that got Wall Street so excited? Well, here's your answer. The bill sliced $1 trillion from federal health programs. Yeah, just going to let that number hang in the air for a second. $1 trillion.
Okay, so remember that Don-roe Doctrine we were just talking about? The whole, we'll just take your stuff idea? Well, it turns out that wasn't just a fun theory they were kicking around. Nope, they actually did it, and they did not waste any time.
Check out this timeline. On January 3rd, U.S. forces roll into Venezuela and capture its president. Just 4 days after that, the Navy is out in the middle of the Atlantic seizing a Russian oil tanker. And by the very next day, the U.S. Senate is already scrambling to try and hit the emergency brake. It was, to put it mildly, a very busy week. And here's where the plot really thickens. That pushback in the Senate wasn't just from Democrats. 5 Republican senators, and you see some pretty big names here, actually joined in to try and limit the president's war powers. And his response? He hopped on social media and declared they should never be elected to office again. So, team morale seems to be at an all-time high. So while all that's going on overseas, a whole other war was opening up right at home in Washington, D.C. This one was a war on what the president famously calls the deep state. Which brings us to a question that I am pretty sure has never, ever been asked in American history before. Why in the world is the Department of Justice running a criminal investigation into the chairman of the Federal Reserve? I mean, what could he possibly have done? Tried to smuggle the gold out of Fort Knox in his briefcase? And the answer is just chef's kiss. The official reason? He's being investigated for allegedly lying under oath about how much it cost to renovate his office. Seriously. But the political reality? The president had been on TV for months calling the guy a stubborn moron because he wouldn't cut interest rates. I'm sure that two things are completely unrelated.
Another key weapon in his domestic fight is something called Schedule F. Now, this is an executive order that basically reclassifies up to 50,000 career federal jobs, and it strips away all their normal job protections. To put that in plain English, it's kind of like turning tens of thousands of key government experts into political interns who can be fired on a whim.
So you take all of this, the roller coaster economy, the aggressive foreign policy, the war on DC institutions, and it is all building towards one massive political collision, the 2026 midterm elections. The president himself has framed it as the ultimate test, a referendum on his entire agenda. And heading into those midterms, the administration is sailing into some pretty serious political headwinds. When you look at the generic polls, which just ask people, hey, which party do you prefer? Democrats are holding a massive 14-point lead with registered voters. That is a tough hill to climb.
But the president has made the stakes incredibly clear and incredibly personal. He's on the record saying, if they win the House, they will find a reason to impeach me. So, no pressure, guys.
This all brings us to the final, biggest question of all. After all the chaos, all the radical moves, all the drama, is any of this stuff actually working? Is this huge, high-risk gamble actually, good for the country?
Well, the case for yes, it is good, is actually pretty simple. The stock market is through the roof. You've got new investments bringing high-tech manufacturing jobs back to America. And, the U.S. now controls one of the biggest oil reserves on the entire planet.
But then the case for no, this is bad, is just as powerful. The gap between the rich and poor is getting even wider. Core American institutions are under constant attack. Our allies are completely freaked out, and the national debt is projected to balloon by another $3.4 trillion. So, there's also that.
So what is it? A genius master plan or a historic meltdown? Well, the report doesn't pick a side. It just says that 2026 is the year America finds out. And on that comforting thought, thanks for tuning in to this explainer.